Hello, everybody. Welcome to another conversation with Justin and Jason. Today we are joined by Billy Van Zandt. How you doing today, Billy?
Well, so far so good. So don't mess it up on me.
I will do my best not to.
All right.
But I figure we start with the book because the book kind of spirals into all the other stories in your life. But what made you decide to write a book?
Well, it started out because my kids asked me. They didn't quite understand what it was I did when I produced a television show. They were too young, and they knew all my theater stuff because they would come to the rehearsals and they'd see the whole process. But so I started writing this for them. Took off and had a life of its own, and I'm really happy with it. It's every chapter is a different TV show that Jane and I worked on, and it's all funny stories, a little bit of gossip, and I'm only nasty to a few people, I think.
Very cool. So yeah, I'm curious. What does a television producer do? We've had a few movie producers on, and it seems like we get a different answer every time that we ask.
Oh well. TV, if you're the executive producer of a TV show, you are in charge of everything involved on that show. You're in charge of the casting. You're in charge of hiring the writers. You hire the line producer, who is the money guy who puts your crew together. But it's all with your approval on everything. And the only people that we end up answering to, we have to answer to the studio who is paying for the show, and we have to answer to the network who's putting the show on the air. But ultimately, it's the audience tells you what to do, really. And aside from that, the executive producer or the creator of the show, they run the whole thing. And if you're a writer on that show, you'll see all these different titles on a TV show: co-producers, supervising producer, co-executive producer, staff writer. They're all just writers. They all have different names. But their job is to imitate the writer who created the show. You may be brilliant on your own, but that's not your job. Your job is to imitate the voice of the creator of the show, so every episode has the same feel to it.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, starting at the beginning, you were in Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
I was.
What is that experience like?
It was fantastic. I had just come off of Jaws 2. That was my first movie. And Robert Wise, who I was so thrilled to get to work with, he's a legendary guy, sweetest guy too. He interviewed me, and he told me, this never ended up happening, but he told me that there was possibility Leonard Nimoy was not going to come to work, so I would be the other alien on the ship. And I had big dreams right there, And of course, he showed up to work the next day, and. But it was funny because I really wanted to be, I know the Trekkies know every inch of the ship and all this other stuff. So I wanted to be good at what I was doing. So I went there I am. I went to George Takei and said, I want to make sure this is right. So when I'm pressing the keyboard, what buttons am I supposed to be pressing? And he said, I don't know. I just bang my fingers around. So I was okay, fine. So that was one. Michelle read her lines. She pasted them on her screen. But everybody was great. I really liked everybody. I especially liked William Shatner. He gets a bum rap from people, and I don't quite know why. I really liked working with him. To give you some example, my girlfriend at the time had come to see I snuck her in. There was a lot of secrecy involved with this shoot. It was the first movie. So she was in my dressing room. I snuck her onto the set, and I hid her behind a bunch of cables and all this stuff so she could see a little bit. And we started shooting a scene, and Mr. Shatner stopped the camera. He said, "There's somebody back there." And I thought, "Oh God, they're gonna fire me now." He said, "You come over here." And my girlfriend walked forward, and he went, "You can't see from back there. Somebody get her a chair. We'll put her up in the front." So he stuck her right by the camera. It was fantastic.
I actually met Shatner myself in Saudi Arabia, and I thought he was the nicest guy in the world. So yeah. I had a really good experience with him as well.
Yeah, I really liked him. Leonard Nimoy and I would arrive first thing in the morning because we had the elaborate makeup. I had the big head and all that. So we sat in the chair. I think we were there about an hour getting made up, and then William Shatner would come in 5 minutes before we were going to shoot, and Leonard would have notes on every inch of that script. Bill, I think in this scene, instead of this, I'm going to do this, and you should do this instead of that. And William Shatner would just go, sure, whatever you want. He was so easy to work with, I got to say. I know my costume from that sold about 5 years ago somewhere for 30 grand. I wish I'd stolen it. The only thing I have from that, I have the when they made a mold of my face, for some reason that it was only from my nose up, even though I remember doing the whole thing with a straw in my mouth. I still have the head, my original head from 40 years ago, whatever it was. I still have that. And but Star Trek was great. Star Trek was fun. And then in a couple of years later, I did the movie Taps, about a military academy, and purely coincidental, my character was a Trekkie watching Star Trek. That was a little strange for me.
I wanted to ask about Taps, so we'll just go to that real quick. What was it like working with Tom Cruise, a very unknown Tom Cruise?
Completely unknown at the time. I always say the movie Taps starred George C. Scott and Tim Hutton back when we made it. Now it's known as the movie that stars Sean Penn and Tom Cruise. Forget the other guys were in it. Tom was a really sweet guy, very likable, very innocent. I would say he was incredibly innocent. It was his second movie. He had done one little scene in a Brooke Shields movie, and other than that, this was his first. And Sean, on the other hand, he was a very, very serious method actor. He was always in character, and he decided that if he was in character, everybody had to be in character. I didn't play along with that, but a lot of guys did. And Tom, who was very innocent and I would say bordering on gullible, he did whatever Sean told him to do. So in the movie, Sean's character and Tom's character hated each other. So Sean went out of his way to antagonize Tom in scenes that he wasn't even in. He would come show up on the set when he wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd stand behind the camera. He'd make faces and try and ruin the take on Tom just so Tom would get mad at him for later on. And it was really funny to watch. But the three of us hung around for a while. I hung around with Sean a lot longer when we came all back to LA. And here's a quick, I hope it's quick story about Sean and Tom. I helped put together a movie called At Close Range that Sean Penn did. I say I helped put it together. I literally just got the script to Sean and told him he had to option the movie to be in it and all this sort of thing. So Sean read it and he optioned it and said, okay, I'm going to play the lead and you're going to play this other little role. I said, fantastic. So a year goes by, the movie's getting made, and I'm told that the director said I'm too old for the role. I was like, okay, that's the way it goes. So I go to Sean and Madonna's wedding, and I'm standing there talking to Tom, and this guy comes up, and he looks, a lot older than me. And I said, oh, how do you know Sean? He said, oh, I just did a movie with him. I said, oh, what role did you play? And he mentions my role. So Tom looks at this guy who looks older than me, and he starts laughing at me, basically, I got screwed out of the role, ha ha. So I said, I'll get even with this guy. And at the end of the night, Tom came to me and he said, Billy, there's so many paparazzi, you're bugging me. I parked miles away and I took a cab here. Can you drive me back to my car? And I said, yeah, sure. Here's what I'll do. I'll give the valet my ticket. When my car comes up, I'll jump in, I'll signal, you come out, jump in the car, I'll take you to your car. The paparazzi won't bother you at all. He said, okay, that'd be great. So at the end of the night, I signal, I get the car from the valet, I jump in, I signal to Tom. He starts to run out, and I took off, and I left him there, surrounded by all these paparazzi who were just clicking away at him. And it was like, I got even with you. And he told me that he jumped in the very next limo, which turned out to be Andy Warhol's limo. He didn't care whose it was. He just got in. And, so that was a little Tom story there.
That is awesome.
So I was looking at your IMDb, and I noticed you've done some stuff around Lucille Ball, and I thought that was crazy. I mean, that sounds amazing. Did you interact with Lucy at all, or?
I did. She's the reason I went into this business. I wanted to do the type of comedy they did on I Love Lucy. I'm from New Jersey, and in Jersey, because of the stations coming out of New York, Lucy was on about 8 times a day in different, one show and then
Yeah.
show. And I watched all of them as a kid. So I started studying her timing. I studied the writers, how they structured the scripts, and I knew I wanted to go into comedy. Even when I was like 10 years old, I knew I wanted to do this. So I just studied and studied and studied, and eventually I had the great pleasure of finally getting to know her and work with her on her final TV show, which was just was a crazy dream come true for this kid.
I imagine that sounds amazing.
It was. It was great. She was great. Yeah.
Did I read correctly that you watched the last show she did with her?
Yeah. The my friend Ann Dusenberry, who had been in Jaws 2 with me, she played Tina in Jaws 2. She was cast as Lucy's daughter on the Life with Lucy, the final Lucy show. And so I came out to visit for the pure reason of I wanted to meet Lucille Ball.
Right.
And I ended up over the course of that, I was there with her for 3 weeks. I watched 1 week of rehearsal. I auditioned and got on the show for the second week, and I was ready to go back east. And Lucy said, "You doing anything Monday night?" I said, "No, why?" She said, "Why don't you come over to the house? We're going to watch the first episode." It's like, okay.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I was in her house, which was crazy weird for me. And we had dinner, spaghetti and meatballs and chocolate cake. I remember that. And ignorant that as I was, I figured she cooked it, So I was like, "Oh, this food's very delicious." And she pointed to somebody in the corner and went, "Yeah, they can cook anything." I was like, "Okay." So after dinner we watched the TV show, and I realized I was sitting on the floor, in front of the TV screen, watching it the way I used to watch her back in my parents' house. And I realized halfway through the show, she's behind me. She's watching me watch the show. It was very surreal. And thank God it was a funny episode, and I laughed a lot. But it was great. You're always afraid to meet your idols because they're going to be horrible people and ruin everything for you.
Yeah.
She was exactly what I wanted her to be. She was just terrific. Really lovely lady.
I bet that was a surreal moment because you just said that was the reason you wanted to get into making movies and comedies. And then you're sitting in the house watching an episode of a show with your hero. That's awesome.
Yeah. When I first came out to LA, Jane was my girlfriend at the time, my writing partner through the years, but back then she was my girlfriend. We came out here to do some scenes from Jaws 2. And I left the airport and went straight to Lucy's house. And I started to get out of the car, and Jane said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to meet her." She said, and Jane hid under the dashboard. And I walked up the brick walkway. I knocked on the door. Houseboy answered the door, and I said, "Billy Van Zandt's here to see Lucille Ball." And he said, "She's not home." Slammed the door in my face. Got back in the car, and we left. So 10 years later, that night I'm watching the show in her living room with Lucy. We started talking about a bunch of different things. I said, "Did you ever meet Charlie Chaplin?" I said, "I see his influence in your work, but I never saw a picture of the two of you together. So did you ever meet him?" He said, "No, but I'll tell you a funny story. In 1976, I was in Switzerland, and I found out where he lived. So my husband Gary and I drove to his house. But Gary wouldn't get out of the car. He hid under the dashboard. And I got out, and I walked up, and I knocked on the door, and I said, 'Lucille Ball's here to see Charlie Chaplin.' They said, 'He's not home,' and slammed the door in my face." Very surreal moment for me.
Full circle. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is a great. Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
No, you're okay. I was just thinking about it. I mean, you've met you worked with another titan of comedy. I think Bob Newhart, right? I mean, how crazy was that?
First TV show. He was fantastic. He spoiled me for everybody that came after him. What a gentleman! Incredibly funny, incredibly professional, but really giving. And the whole set felt like one big family. I've worked on other shows where you want to blow your brains out working on them, but this one was fantastic. And I'm a fan of Green Acres, and by the time I got on his Newhart show, it had gone from a guy who runs a bed and breakfast to Green Acres. It was just another crazy. All the people in it were nuts, and boy, I had fun writing that. And we actually at one point they allowed me to we brought Alvy Moore, who played Hank Kimball on Green Acres. We brought him on to basically play the same role, just to please me. They were very nice about it. So one thing I've been able to do, which I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing, but it's good for me. Any chance I have to bring any of my childhood heroes out of retirement and onto camera, I like to do it. I brought Hunts Hall from the Bowery Boys out of retirement for what probably was his last TV show. And the network people look at you like you're crazy. First of all, they don't know anybody you're talking about, because they're all 20 years old. And so I brought Hunts Hall, and he played this little role on a show I did for Don Rickles and Richard Lewis. And at the table reading, he read, and afterwards the network people said, "Oh, you got to fire him." I said, "What do you mean we got to fire him?" "Oh, he's old. He's never going to remember the lines." I said, "Just trust me. Guy's been around for 80 years doing what he's doing." So at the end of the week, they not only did he keep him in the show, they offered him like 2 pilots, because they were so impressed with how funny he was. So yeah, I did that. I brought a lot of people out. Kay Ballard thanked me for bringing her back to television, which was horrible that nobody had brought her back to television. A lot of great people I like working with, and Jane and I have been very loyal through the years, where we go back to the same people all the time. If somebody, we like working with somebody, why do we want to find somebody else when they're going to play the role just as well? So yeah,
that's great. So you've been a producer on quite a bit of shows. Martin, the Wayans Brothers, and Hughley's are 3 in particular. What is it like working on those shows?
Yes, for some odd reason, Jane and I, through the 1990s, we were one of the voices of Black America on television. So the weird thing was, well, every show was different. The guys are all different. But as far as the network is concerned, if you do one thing, you're an expert at that, and that's all they want you to do. So in their mind, because I worked with one black guy, I must be, there must be an authority on all black guys. So they kept bringing us back for different shows that had nothing to do with each other. D.L. Hughley is nothing like Martin Lawrence. They're nothing like the Wayans brothers. They just happen to be black. And what I did when we first agreed to do Martin's show, I said, "Look, I'm not going to pretend to be black. I think it's patronizing for me to write as if I'm, I don't know that experience at all." So I said, "I can write the male-female relationship stuff, and you got a black writing staff, and they'll change the words if I'm doing it wrong, So we did that. We did it that way. Jane and I we helped develop the first season of Martin. We created the Garrett Morris character and a bunch of the characters that Martin ended up playing. Otis, the security guard, Roscoe, the little kid with the snot nose. We did that. We did a bunch of them. But he was. I will say he was a little difficult to work with. But I will say, in his defense and the defense of any other stand-up comedian I've ever worked with, they've been their own writer, producer, director for probably 10 years before they ever meet me. And so for them to come in and me to go, "Okay, I know you've been doing this for your whole life, but I'm in charge now, and I'm going to tell you what's funny and what's not funny and what works and what doesn't work." That's a weird transition you got to get through.
That rolled into something I was thinking about while you were talking. Is I would imagine, as a stand-up comedian, did he try to rewrite a lot of the things you gave him? Just saying, "Hey, read this line." He wouldn't do something different, or
no? What Martin would do brilliantly, I will say, is we would give him the script, and he would stick to the script. He would complain about it through the entire week until he was where he wanted it to be. But once we got the script where it was supposed to be, he would improvise things on camera in the scene.
Yeah.
And they were always funny. I mean, it was like he would take one bit we did and he'd turn it into 3 other things, and the cameras just followed him. And
Sure.
and Tisha Campbell, who was brilliant, is brilliant. Her job, which was harder than it looked, was to not only find him hilariously funny and sexy while he's off doing these crazy things, but she'd have to somehow get him back into the script so we could continue. So, she had her work cut out for her.
Yeah.
But Martin was brilliant. Martin actually worked very similar to Bob Newhart, which I never thought was possible, except, Martin would say, I'll clean my language up. He'd speak differently, let's say, but all that mattered to them was the audience that was in the bleachers while you were shooting the show.
Mm.
One take, you did it like a play. One take per scene, move on, finish the show, done. You're done in an hour and a half. A lot of shows I've worked on since then, the producers insist on doing 3, 4, 5 takes of every scene to try and tweak this line. Maybe this line will be funnier. And you're killing your audience that are sitting there watching it, and you're depleting the actors of their energy too. Mm-hmm. And I go back to I Love Lucy. One take, move on, Honeymooners, one take, move on. Mm-hmm. And Bob Newhart worked that way. Martin Lawrence worked that way. And I think we did that the same on the Wayans brothers too. Because we were running that show. But Bob was interesting in that he didn't want to work with a laugh track. He said, if the joke bombs, the people at home aren't stupid. They're not going to laugh because you put a laugh on it. So leave it out. Yeah. And Martin was all about the audience, which was fantastic. And it also made the shoot night was great because you could actually go to dinner afterwards, and all the restaurants are still open.
So on the Wayans brothers, did you have any direct interactions with John Witherspoon?
Yes, I loved him. What a funny guy. What a professional, funny, great guy. We were brought on to the Wayans brothers. There had been they call them presentations, which are short versions of a pilot. Maybe they're 15 minutes long. They don't want to spend a lot of money shooting it. There had been something the year before, and it got picked up, but the showrunners were not picked up with it. They brought a different guy in, and he had a writing staff supposedly for a couple of weeks, months, and they had come up with 0 scripts. And the show was supposed to go on basically live because the WB network was a brand new network, and it had to open on a certain night. And they didn't have any scripts in the works, really. So they brought Jane and me on, and we had to sort of improvise, creating the show, putting it together, casting it, and filming it. I think we had like 5 weeks to do that from the time we said yes to the time it went on the air. So John was already attached to it. And thank God, because you give him anything, you have him say hello, and it was hilariously funny. And we had fun writing for him too, because the character was so bizarre. And I will say the Wayans brothers were great, and John was great. I really liked working on that. It was very out there, because of what we did on Martin, which was the first time I think you really had a combination of a sitcom and sketch comedy in one show. You'd have a regular sitcom and suddenly he'd play Shanae and, whatever he was going to do. So we sort of did the same thing with the Wayans brothers, where it was a sitcom, but we went far left, as we were going. And that made it fun. That made it really fun to do. We were only contracted to do the first season. And then they brought in somebody else who changed the whole show around, brought in the lobby of the big building and brought in different characters. But when we did it, it was because we were doing it so quickly, we were doing our version of the Honeymooners, quite frankly. It was, Marlon was Art Carney, and Sean was Jackie Gleason, and Leela Rashawn, who played the girlfriend, she was Audrey Meadows, and John Witherspoon wasn't he had no connection to the Honeymooners, but, he was John Witherspoon. And that show just ran forever. It ran forever. And we didn't know if Marlon and Sean were going to be funny at all. All they were really known for was being the brothers of Damon and Keenan. And suddenly they had their own show, and it was like, okay, here we go. But really good guys. And they would come into the original question you asked. They would come into the writer's room with us. Martin did not do that. But Sean, because we were under such time restraints, Sean and Marlon would come into the room. We'd be pitching things out, and then they'd try act, how about this? And they'd act something out. We'd see if it worked or not, and then we put it in the script. You can do that very rarely, because a lot of times a comedian will come in and think everything they do is brilliant, and you have to find a way to say, well, no, that one didn't work, without wasting an entire evening of trying to then get back to your script.
Awesome. So the Hughleys you were on for quite some time, working on that. Any cool stories? How was DL to work with?
DL was great. He could not have been sweeter, more professional. He admitted to us, he came to see Jane and I were doing an off-Broadway show called You've Got Hate Mail, and we finally talked him into coming to see it. And he confessed to us afterwards it was the first play he'd ever been to in his life. And he said, "No, I've been to musicals because I have daughters, but it was first play. Well, that was kind of fun." But he was great. We still keep in touch. I still keep in touch with him, and he's brilliantly funny, and I really love the political side he's taken, and his books are good too, by the way.
Awesome. I saw him do stand-up not so long ago, but you rolled into my last question is I want to know what You've Got Hate Mail is all about.
You've Got Hate Mail, which is now done all over the world, and it's so bizarre to me that it is. It started out, I had seen a show called Love Letters, which is a very big A.R. Gurney Broadway show, where two people literally sit on stage and read letters back and forth to each other from the time they're kids to the time they pass away. And I watched that and went, God, I wish I'd written that. There's no rehearsal. You read the script. So we tried writing something called Hate Mail, and it didn't work. We couldn't make it. It was just something weird about it. And then Jane got a divorce, which was the best thing that happened to us. Because she and her ex-husband, he would write, things happened, and he would write to try and make up to her. And I'd be in the office, and she'd be getting these emails, and she'd be crying, and she'd write something nasty back to him, and I'd read it, and I'd laugh because it was horribly funny. And so she'd go to delete them. I went, no, don't delete those. Save those, because we'll probably use them someday. And so when we ran into a stumbling block with this hate mail thing, we suddenly dawned on emails. And if it's a story of a divorce, Jane's divorce, told through emails, we would have 5 actors, 5 laptop computers, and and then we eventually did it with iPads and phones and everything. But originally it was 5 iPads, 5 actors sitting at desks, and you saw the story of a divorce told through email. And it was a huge hit. We ran in New York for 5 years, and then suddenly there are productions of it all over the world. I went down to Mexico City to see it. Hungary, it's playing in Hungary right now. They're streaming it because I can't wait to see that. I don't speak the language, but I know the story. So that's been fun. That was our 22nd play, I think. Jane and I did 23 together. I did 25 altogether, and more. I hope to come.
Yeah.
But that one's really a lot of fun because the gist of it is everybody at one time has hit send to the wrong person or sent a draft that you knew you shouldn't write. You hit send and go, oh, what did I do? That's what starts the show off. A husband is having a fling on the side, and he sends his wife a very dirty email that was supposed to go to the girlfriend, and then you see the whole marriage crumble. And it was really fun. We had so many people step in to do it. The nice thing, because you're reading off of a laptop computer, we could bring in guest stars every night, and they could just read it. So Richard Kind came and did it. Caroline Aaron came and did it. We had Jeff Keller, Phantom of the Opera guy. It was really fun, and I'd do it again.
Is it still obviously not COVID, but is it still touring?
No, we stopped about 3 years ago. We were touring it we probably ran it and toured it 10 years total. But our newest last show is the Boomer Boys musical, and that's the one we closed. You've Got Hate Mail so we could do the Boomer Boys musical, which has been touring for 3 years until the world shut down, and we'll tour again when the world opens up to whatever the world is going to open up to.
Awesome. Justin, you got any more questions?
No, I can't. I would imagine it's an amazing feeling knowing something you worked so hard on is around the world. I can't get over that, like Hungary and things like that.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah,
I gotta
really
say,
cool.
it's pretty weird. I think there's a picture of the Polish cast in my book too. But I'll go back there again. It was a very strange thing. They invited us over to see that show, and then down the street, coincidentally, we didn't know it at the time, was another one of our shows, Love, Sex, and the IRS. And so I'm a big hit in Poland. Yeah.
Well, Billy, thank you so much for coming on our show. I could talk to you for days. You've got some great stories and great experiences throughout your life. And everybody that's listening or watching, check out his book, Get in the Car, Jane, Adventures in the TV Wasteland. I started it. It's a lot of fun so far. I'm enjoying it.
Great.
Where can everybody find you online?
I have no idea. You can go to my website, vanzantmillmore.com, and you can see all the different TV shows and plays and all that, and the films and all that stuff. And I know I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I don't know even what the handle is, but if you look up my name, you'll figure it out. Yeah. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and somehow you'll find me. Or you can get through me on Amazon where the book is. I think they have it.
That's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Check out his book. His Twitter handle is Billy V Zandt. So follow him on Twitter. From all of us at the Three Geeks Podcast, have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.